"You look like a king," the little girl whispered. "Can kings save mommies?" Shindero, a man who had put 7 people in the ground without blinking, stood completely frozen. The rain from his black trench coat dripped onto the white marble, the only sound in the sudden, suffocating silence of the Blackwood Grand. A child had just done what no enemy ever could. She had stopped him. She was dark-skinned and wide-eyed, wearing a pale dress that had once been white. In her hand was a crumpled candy wrapper folded into neat quarters, her bribe, her bargaining chip, the most valuable thing she owned. She wasn't crying. She had the stillness of a child who had already spent all her tears and moved on to something harder hope. And something about her face, something he couldn't name yet, felt like a door he had walked past before. The hotel staff had been warned he was coming. 3 of them had called in sick that morning. But this child hadn't gotten the warning or simply hadn't cared. "My mom is sick," she said, looking up at him with those impossible eyes. "Her boss took all our money. She's upstairs and she can't breathe right and nobody will help us." Darrow looked down at the candy wrapper in her hand. Then he looked up. Across the lobby, the manager, a man named Petrescu, was already smoothing his tie. Wearing the careful smile of someone preparing a lie, Darrow's jaw tightened. He had come here tonight to destroy one man's empire. He just hadn't known yet whose empire it would be. Darrow crouched down. Not because he was a gentleman. He wasn't. But he had learned long ago that when you needed the truth, you got on the same level as the person holding it. "What is your name?" "Emberly." "How old are you, Emberly?" 7 and 3 months. She said the 3 months the way children do, like they matter more than the years. "Where is your mother right now?" "Upstairs. In the place where they keep the mops and the broken chairs. Room 13C. I counted the doors." She paused. "She told me not to come down here." But she was making the bad sound again. The bad sound. When she breathes. Like there's something stuck. Darrow stood slowly. He looked at the candy wrapper still extended toward him in her small hand. He took it, folded it once more and slipped it into his breast pocket like it was a signed contract. Because to him, it now was. He turned to Jin, the quieter of his 2 men. One look. Jin was already moving toward the elevator. Petrescu met them at the concierge desk with a smile that had clearly been rehearsed. "Mr. Shin, we are so honored." "Room 13C, Darrow said. "What is it?" "A flicker. Just for a second." "Storage. Equipment. Nothing of interest to a man of your—" "Is there a woman in it?" The smile held, but the eyes changed. "Our staff quarters are private. I wouldn't want to—" "Petrescu." The man stopped talking. "I asked you a question." The lobby had gone completely still. The receptionist had stopped typing. The doorman was studying the floor. Everyone in that room had suddenly found somewhere else to look. "There is a staff member who has been unwell," Petrescu said carefully. "We have been accommodating her while we arrange unwell since when?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Darrow let that number sit between them like smoke. "And her wages?" "Handled. Per company policy, show me her file." "Mr. Shin, I really don't think—" It wasn't a request. The file arrived in 4 minutes. Her name was Taryn. 31 years old. Immigrant work visa. Housekeeper. 18 months of service. Last recorded payment 11 weeks ago. Not 3. 11. Medical leave request denied twice. Emergency contact none listed. Darrow set the file down. He looked at Emberly, who had followed quietly and was now standing beside him, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers without him noticing when that had happened. He looked back at Petrescu. "You stopped paying her 11 weeks ago. There were performance issues. That she has a 7-year-old daughter. That is not the hotel's. And you locked her in a storage room. She was given a space to rest, while... What?" Darrow's voice didn't rise. It never did. It just got quieter, which was somehow worse. "While you decided what to do with her. While you kept her hidden so your guests wouldn't see a sick woman you'd already stopped paying." Petrescu said nothing. His smile was completely gone. Darrow reached into his jacket. Not for a weapon for his phone. 1 call. 30 seconds. 4 words. He hung up. I just bought this hotel, he said simply. Which means I just became your employer. Which means you now have 60 seconds to take me to room 13C before this conversation becomes something you will not recover from. The service elevator smelled like bleach and old carpet. Emberly rode up between Darrow and Jin in complete silence. 13 floors of it. When the doors opened, she led without waiting, counting doors under her breath, the way she had obviously done before. Many times before, she stopped at 13C. Darrow put his hand on the door and looked at her. Stay here. Right here. Don't move. She nodded once. Very seriously. He opened the door. Small room. Cold. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The smell of medicine and damp walls. In the corner, on a folded blanket, lay a woman. Her breathing was audible from the doorway. Shallow. Labored. The bad sound. Darrow crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside her. He moved the hair from her face gently, carefully, in a way that would have surprised anyone who knew his name. And then he stopped. He knew this face. He knew the scar on her shoulder. The burning car. Chicago. 10 years ago. The woman who had pulled him out with her bare hands and disappeared before he could ask her name. He had looked for her for 3 years. Jin, he said quietly, get me a doctor. Now. And lock every exit in this building. He looked at Taryn. I found you, he said. I'm sorry it took so long. The doctor arrived in 11 minutes. Her name was Dr. Yun, compact, precise, the kind of woman who didn't ask unnecessary questions when Darrow's number appeared on her phone at midnight. She came through the service door with a bag over her shoulder and went straight to Taryn without greeting anyone. Darrow stepped back and let her work. He stood in the doorway and looked at the room the way he looked at crime. Seen slowly, completely, cataloging everything. The folded blanket on the floor, the almost empty water bottle, a small pile in the corner, a child's drawing, a worn paperback, a cracked phone wrapped carefully in cloth to protect what was left of it. Taryn had not been recovering in this room. She had been living in it. He made a second call. 90 seconds. When he hung up, 3 things had been set in motion that Petrescu wouldn't know about until it was far too late. Emberly was exactly where he had left her, back straight, both hands holding her dress. When she saw him come out, she took 1 step forward and stopped herself, like she had been practicing restraint. She was too young to need. Is she awake? Not yet, but the doctor is with her. She's going to be okay. Emberly looked at him for a long moment, measuring the words, deciding whether to believe them. Then she exhaled 1 long, shaking breath she had clearly been holding for longer than tonight. She sat down on the floor right there in the corridor. Darrow looked at her. Then he sat down beside her, back against the wall, which was not a thing Darrow did, and yet here he was. How long have you been coming up here alone? Every night, she said, after the big man at the door falls asleep. What big man? The one Mr. Petrescu put there, to make sure Mommy didn't come downstairs. She said it plainly, without drama, the way children report facts they don't yet have the language to call cruelty. Did anyone try to help you? The lady at the linen desk used to leave food outside the door, but then she stopped coming. Mr. Petrescu said she quit. She didn't quit, Darrow thought. He added that to the list. The list was getting long. Petrescu was in his 3rd-floor office, which Darrow's men had quietly sealed from the outside. When Darrow walked in, the manager was on his phone. He hung up the moment he saw the look on Darrow's face. Mr. Shin, I want to assure you that everything regarding Miss Taryn was handled within... Darrow placed 3 things on the desk. The candy wrapper, Taryn's file, and the hotel acquisition confirmation stamped, signed, generated in the 11 minutes while Dr. Yun had been working upstairs. Petrescu stared at the document. I own this building, Darrow said, which means I now have full access to every personnel record, every payroll file, and every security log going back 18 months. He sat down across from Petrescu, the way you sit across from someone when you already know everything and are simply deciding what to do with it. I know about the 11 weeks. I know about the guard you posted on the 13th floor. I know about the linen attendant who tried to help her and lost her job for it. I know about the medical requests you denied and buried." He paused. "And I know Taryn is not the only one." Petrescu had gone the color of old paper. "I want a lawyer," he said. "That's interesting," Darrow said quietly. "Because the men I called tonight aren't lawyers." He leaned forward slightly. "You are going to sign every asset connected to this operation into a trust. For Emberly. For her mother's medical care. For every worker you stole from. Tonight, in this room. Before I leave. And if I don't?" Darrow looked at him. Just looked at him. No threat. No raised voice. The flat, patient gaze of a man who had never needed to repeat himself. Petrescu picked up the pen. It took 40 minutes. When it was done, Darrow walked back upstairs. "Doctor." Yun was in the corridor packing her bag. "She's awake," she said. "Stable enough to move. But Darrow." She stopped him. She was days away. He nodded once. Then he pushed open the door to 13C. Taryn was sitting up on the blanket, back against the wall. Emberly folded into her side, like she had been slotted back into a space that had been empty too long. Taryn looked up at him weak, pale, but her eyes were clear and sharp, and full of a question she hadn't asked yet. "You don't know me," Darrow said quietly, "but 10 years ago outside Chicago you pulled a man out of a burning car. You didn't wait to be thanked. You just left." Taryn's breath caught. "I've been looking for you since," he said. "I'm sorry I found you like this." The room was silent. Emberly looked up at her mother, then at Darrow. "I told you," she said simply. "He's a king." Taryn didn't cry. She looked at him for a long time, the kind of look that takes inventory, that checks every corner of a face for deception, and then she simply said, "I remember you." 3 words, but the weight behind them filled the entire room. "You were unconscious," Darrow said. "The car was on its side. You broke the window with your elbow." "With a rock," she corrected quietly. "I used a rock." He almost smiled. "With a rock." Emberly looked between them, the way children watch adults when they sense something important is happening that nobody is explaining. She tightened her grip on her mother's sleeve but said nothing. "Why were you looking for me?" Taryn asked. "Because you saved my life and disappeared," he said. "In my world, that's an unfinished transaction." "I didn't do it for a transaction." "I know," he said. "That's why I looked for 3 years. The ambulance came without sirens. Darrow had specified that. No lights, no noise, nothing that turned this into a spectacle in the lobby. Taryn was moved on a stretcher, Emberly walking beside it with one hand on the rail, not letting go. The staff they passed in the corridors stopped and stared not at Taryn, but at Darrow walking behind them, hands in his pockets. Expression unreadable. They had never seen him like this. Nobody had. At the lobby, the night manager, a young man named Seo, who had nothing to do with Petrescu's operation, and had clearly been terrified for months, stepped forward. "Mr. Shin, is there anything—" "The linen attendant Petrescu fired," Darrow said without stopping. "Find her tonight. Offer her head of housekeeping. Full back pay from the day she was let go." "Yes, sir." The staff members with unpaid wages, personal calls before morning, not emails. Calls. Understood. Darrow walked past him toward the exit. The hospital was private, 20 minutes away. By the time the ambulance arrived, a room was ready, not a ward. A room, with a window and actual furniture and a small folding bed beside the main one so Emberly didn't have to sleep in a chair. The child noticed the folding bed immediately. She looked at it, then at Darrow. He was already turning to leave. "Will you come back?" she asked. He stopped. In 15 years, nobody had ever asked him that with genuine hope behind it. It was always asked out of fear. This was different. "Yes," he said. "Promise?" He reached into his breast pocket and held out the candy wrapper. "I'll return this when I come back," he said. "So you know I'm coming." Emberly looked at the candy wrapper. Then she nodded, very seriously, and climbed onto the folding bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She was asleep in 4 minutes. Jin was waiting outside in the corridor. "Petrescu?" Darrow asked without stopping. "Signed everything. Currently in a room on the second floor with 2 of our men, and a very uncomfortable silence. The authorities? Ready when you give the word. The wage theft documentation alone is enough for criminal charges. The rest, Jin paused. The rest is worse than we thought. Darrow stopped walking. How much worse? Taryn wasn't the only one he locked up. There are records going back 4 years. Immigrant workers housed in service rooms, wages withheld, visas held over their heads to keep them quiet. Jin kept his voice even. He was running it like a system. The corridor was very quiet. How many? Across 3 hotels. 17. Maybe more. Darrow stood with that number for a moment. 17 people. 17 sets of stolen wages. 17 threats made and kept, because the alternative was worse. Make the call, he said. All 3 hotels. Tonight. It'll make noise, Jin said. Press. Questions about how we found out. Make the call. Jin nodded and stepped away. Darrow went back to Taryn's room one more time before he left. She was awake, an oxygen line under her nose, her eyes tracking him as he came through the door. The monitors beside her beeped slow and steady, the sound of someone who had come very close to the edge and been pulled back from it. My daughter, she said. She went downstairs looking for help, didn't she? It wasn't a question. She did, he said. Taryn closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was something in them that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite guilt, something in between that only mothers carry. She found the right person, Darrow said, quietly. Did she? Taryn looked at him directly. Who are you exactly? I know your name. I don't know what you are. Darrow considered the question honestly, which was more than he did for most people. Until tonight. He said, I wasn't entirely sure myself. He left before she could respond. In the corridor, he reached into his pocket and touched the candy wrapper once. Then he walked toward the elevator, already thinking about 3 hotels, 17 names, and the very long night still ahead of him. The first hotel was called the Meridian. 12 blocks from the Blackwood Grand, close enough that Petrescu could walk between them on his lunch break, which, according to the records Darrow's men had pulled, he did. Every Tuesday, collecting envelopes. They arrived at 2 a.m. Not loudly. Darrow didn't do loud. 4 men, 2 cars, no conversation. The night manager at the Meridian opened his office door and found Darrow already sitting in his chair, the payroll files open on the desk in front of him. The man lasted 6 minutes before he started talking. The second hotel was called the Harlow, nicer than the other 2 marble entrants, rooftop restaurant, the kind of place that appeared in lifestyle magazines with words like curated and elevated in the captions, which made what was happening in its basement floors considerably worse. Darrow found 3 workers in the service quarters on sublevel 2, a man from the Philippines who hadn't been paid in 9 weeks, 2 women from Vietnam sharing a room with a broken heater, their passports held in a locked drawer in the shift supervisor's office. The shift supervisor was still on site. That conversation lasted less than 4 minutes. By 4 a.m., they had 17 names, 17 files, 17 separate records of the same crime committed quietly and repeatedly in the spaces of the city that the city had agreed not to look at. Darrow sat in the back of the car outside the Harlow and read every file. Jin sat in the front and didn't speak. He had learned years ago that there were moments when Darrow needed silence the way other men needed air. He built a system, Darrow said finally. Yes, Jin said. 3 hotels, 4 years, 17 people that we know of. He closed the last file. Every single one of them stayed quiet because they had no papers, no contacts, and nowhere to go. He knew exactly who to target. Yes. Darrow looked out the window at Seoul at 4 a.m. stripped back. The performance of the day not yet reassembled. Just concrete and rain, and occasional lights in windows where someone was awake for reasons that were probably not good. Every passport returned by morning, he said. Every withheld wage calculated with interest and deposited by end of business today. Every worker offered proper accommodation tonight, not the hotels. Somewhere clean and separate. That's going to cost. I know what it's going to cost. Jin nodded and got on the phone. The authorities arrived at the Blackwood Grand at 5 a.m. Dyro had timed that too, early enough that Petrescu had no opportunity to make calls, late enough that the documentation was complete, clean, organized, devastating. The kind of file that prosecutors dream about because someone had already done all the work. Petrescu was walked out through the service entrance in the gray pre-dawn light, the same entrance Taryn had used every morning for 18 months. Darrow had specified that as well. He watched from across the street, hands in his pockets. Jin appeared beside him. The other two managers are being picked up simultaneously. Good. The press is going to connect this to you. I know. You don't seem concerned. I'm not, Darrow said. Let them connect it. Jin glanced at him. In 15 years, he had never heard Darrow say anything close to that. The man had built an entire empire on invisibility, on being the hand that moved things without ever appearing in the frame. Something changed tonight, Jin said. It wasn't a question. A 7-year-old girl asked me if kings could save mommies, Darrow said. I'd like to be able to tell her yes. Jin had nothing to say to that, so he said nothing. Darrow returned to the hospital at 6 a.m. The city was beginning to wake first buses, first street vendors, first gray light pushing through the clouds. The rain had finally stopped. Everything looked scrubbed and temporary the way cities look just after weather, before the day reassembles itself. He took the elevator to the 4th floor and pushed open the door quietly. Taryn was asleep, breathing steadily, a completely different sound from what Emberly had described the night before. The monitors were calm. The room was warm. Emberly was asleep on the folding bed, one arm hanging off the edge, mouth slightly open. Darrow stood in the doorway for a moment. He reached into his pocket and placed the candy wrapper on the bedside table where Emberly would see it when she woke, not returning it, just leaving proof he had been there. Then he pulled the blanket up over her hanging arm, quietly, without waking her. He straightened up and looked at the two of them, mother and daughter, breathing the same slow rhythm in the warm morning light. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the mathematics of his world produced a result that felt like something other than damage. He left before either of them woke up, but he left the candy wrapper. He was coming back. 3 weeks passed. Taryn recovered the way strong. People recover not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. One day building on the last until the oxygen line was gone, and the monitors were silent, and the doctor used the word discharged, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Darrow visited every 3rd day. He didn't announce it. He simply appeared sometimes in the morning with food from a specific restaurant 2 streets away that Emberly had mentioned once, offhandedly, the way children mention things without knowing they're being heard. Sometimes in the evening, staying no longer than 30 minutes, sitting in the chair by the window while Taryn talked and he listened. He was, it turned out, a very good listener. Taryn noticed that early. She also noticed that he never talked about himself unless she asked directly, and that when Emberly spoke, he gave her his complete attention, not the performance of attention that adults give children, but the real thing. Eyes level, body still, full presence. It unsettled her, how gentle he was in that room. She had Googled his name on the 3rd day. She wished she hadn't. On the day of discharge, Darrow arrived with 2 documents. The first was the title deed to an apartment, 3 bedrooms, 4th floor, 12 minutes from the hospital, fully furnished. Taryn opened the envelope, read the first line, and put it face down on the bed without finishing it. No, she said. It's not charity, Darrow said. It's restitution. The trust covers it. I know what it is, she said. I'm saying no. Darrow looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them blinked. Emberly, sitting on the folding bed with her shoes already on, watched this exchange with great interest. Mommy loses staring contests, she offered helpfully. Taryn's expression cracked slightly at the edges. Emberly, it's true. Darrow said nothing. He simply waited, which was somehow more effective than arguing. Taryn looked at the envelope, then at her daughter. Then she picked it back up and finished reading it. 3 bedrooms is too much, she said finally. The 3rd one is an office, he said. You mentioned you were taking accounting courses before the hospital. She stared at him. I mentioned that once, in passing. I know. A long silence. I'm paying rent, she said. Whatever the market rate is. Fine. I mean it. I know you mean it, he said. That's why I said fine. The second document was for Emberley, a school enrollment, one of the better private schools in the district, starting the following Monday. Full scholarship from the trust. Darrow placed it in front of her without ceremony. Emberley picked it up and studied it with the seriousness she applied to everything. Do they have art? 3 teachers in the art department, he said. She considered this carefully. Okay. Taryn watched her daughter accept a life-changing document the way other children accepted snacks, and felt something shift behind her sternum that she didn't have a name for yet. They moved in that afternoon. Darrow's men carried everything, which wasn't much. 2 bags, a box of Emberley's drawings, the worn paperback from the floor of 13C. Taryn carried that one herself. The apartment had a window in the main room that looked over a small park. When Emberley saw it, she went straight there and stood for a long time looking out at the trees. I can see the sky, she said, to nobody in particular. Darrow stood in the doorway and watched Taryn move through the apartment opening cupboards, checking taps, running her hand along the kitchen counter with the careful thoroughness of someone who had lived without enough, for long enough that having enough felt like something to verify. He didn't go inside. He stayed in the doorway. Jin appeared at his shoulder. The car's ready, Darrow nodded. He was turning to leave when he heard Emberley behind him. Wait. She came running from the main room with a folded piece of paper held out in both hands the same way she had offered the candy wrapper. Same gravity, same complete seriousness. He took it and unfolded it. A crayon drawing, 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing beneath enormous wings that curved around both of them like a shield. Above the tall figure, in large careful letters, the Dragon King. Darrow looked at the drawing for a long time. That's you, Emberley said. And that's me, and the wings are so nothing bad can come in. He folded it once carefully and placed it in his breast pocket. Same pocket as the candy wrapper. Thank you, he said. You can keep it, she said. I made it for you. He looked at her. This child who had walked through a lobby full of powerful, frightened people and chosen him, who had offered a candy wrapper like a contract and meant every word of it. I know, he said. That's why I'm keeping it. He straightened up, nodded once to Taryn across the room and left. In the elevator going down, Jin glanced at him. You're smiling, Jin said. Darrow said nothing, but he didn't stop. 6 weeks after the Blackwood. Grand. The city went quiet in the way that always preceded something loud. Darrow felt it before he understood it. A shift in the temperature of his world, small and specific. The way a room changes when someone enters it who doesn't belong. 3 meetings canceled without explanation. 2 associates who normally called every Tuesday going suddenly unreachable. A car parked outside his building for 6 hours that belonged to nobody he recognized. He said nothing about it to Taryn. He had fallen into a rhythm with them Tuesday and Friday evenings. The apartment on the 4th floor, dinner that Taryn cooked and refused to let anyone help with. Emberley showed him her schoolwork with the focused intensity of someone presenting quarterly reports. She had been top of her art class for 3 consecutive weeks, and mentioned it each time with carefully managed casualness that fooled nobody. He looked forward to Tuesdays and Fridays more than he had looked forward to anything in years, which was precisely why the car outside his building bothered him. The answer came on a Thursday. His phone rang at 7 a.m., a number he recognized immediately and hadn't seen in 4 years. He let it ring twice before he answered. Kang, he said. Darrow. The voice on the other end was smooth and unhurried. The voice of a man who had learned to speak slowly because everything he said landed hard regardless of pace. It's been a long time. Not long enough. A pause. Then something that might have been a laugh. I heard about the Blackwood Grand. Very public for you. What do you want, Kang? A conversation. Tonight. The usual place. Come alone. And if I don't? Then I'll have a different conversation, Kang said. With someone else. Someone on the 4th floor of a building, 12 minutes from the hospital, where a very interesting woman recently recovered. The line went quiet. Darrow's hand tightened on the phone once. then relaxed. "Tonight," he said, and hung up. Kang Junho was the one man and soul who predated Darrow's empire. Not older in age, they were the same generation, had come up through the same streets, sat at the same tables when the city was still being divided. But Kang had started earlier, moved faster, and built something that operated less like an organization and more like a weather system, pervasive, invisible, impossible to locate until it was already on top of you. They had maintained careful distance for 4 years. Not peacemen like them didn't have peace. Just the mutual acknowledgement that the cost of conflict outweighed the benefit. That calculation had apparently changed. The usual place was a private room above a restaurant in Mapo that had no sign outside. Dairo arrived at 9. Kang was already there, which meant he had been waiting at least an hour, which meant this conversation was about power from the first sentence. Kang looked exactly as he always had. Thin, well-dressed, with the kind of face that smiled easily and meant nothing by it. A glass of whiskey on the table in front of him, untouched. "Sit down," Kang said. Darrow sat. "You bought 3 hotels," Kang said. "I did. Those properties were in my territory. They were owned by a man running a trafficking operation," Darrow said. "I shut it down. That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Kang?" Kang leaned forward slightly. "The point is that you moved inside my boundary without a conversation. You made noise press, authorities, public record in a district I have kept very quiet for a very long time." He paused. "And whatever that woman and her daughter mean to you, they are now leverage. I want you to understand that I understand that." The room was very still. "Are you threatening them?" Darrow said quietly. "Or warning me?" Kang studied him. "I'm giving you the opportunity to decide which one it becomes." Darrow looked at him for a long moment. He thought about the drawing in his breast pocket, the dragon wings, the 2 figures, the careful crayon letters. He thought about Emberly's face when she had offered him a candy wrapper like it was the most important thing in the world. He thought about Taryn saying, "I didn't do it for a transaction," and meaning it completely. "Then I'll make it simple," Darrow said. "Touch them and there will be nothing left of what you've built. Not the organization, not the properties, not the name, nothing." Kang raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant promise." "It's not a promise," Darrow said, standing. "It's a schedule." He buttoned his jacket. "Find another boundary dispute, Kang. This one is finished." He walked out without looking back. Outside in the cold street, he stood for a moment and looked up at the sky. Then he called Jin. "I need eyes on the 4th floor apartment," he said. 24 hours, starting now." "Kang?" Jin asked. "He knows about them," Darrow said. "Which means the next move has to be ours." He put the phone away and started walking. The quiet that had preceded something loud was over. The loud part was beginning. Darrow didn't sleep. He sat at his desk until 3 a.m., with every file on Kang Junho spread across the surface, not the official records, which said almost nothing, but the real ones. Properties, associates, financial channels, pressure points. The architecture of a man's power laid out in paper and photographs. He had never intended to use them. Now he read every page. Kang's operation ran on 3 things: silence, territory, and the unspoken agreement that certain men and soul simply didn't touch each other. That agreement had held because both sides honored it, but agreements only held when both sides had equal reason to. Darrow's reason had just changed. He wasn't protecting territory anymore. He was protecting a 4th-floor apartment with a window that looked over a park, a woman who paid rent on principle, and a 7-year-old girl who had decided he had dragon wings. That was a different kind of reason entirely. He called a meeting at 6 a.m. 8 men, the inner circle, the ones who had been with him long enough to read a room correctly and ask questions later. They gathered in the office above his main building, coffee on the table, nobody speaking until he spoke. He laid it out clean and fast. Kang's threat, the apartment, what needed to happen next. "We have 2 options," he said. "Respond to Kang directly, which escalates immediately and gives him the war he seems to want. Or we remove his leverage before he can use it." "Remove it how?" asked Park, the oldest of them. A man who had survived 3 regime changes in the Seoul underworld through the simple method of never panicking. We make them unreachable, not hidden that draws attention. Protected in a way that Kang can see clearly, so he understands the calculation before he completes it. You want to move them, Jin said, temporarily. Somewhere Kang's people can't access without making a move so visible it becomes its own problem for him. Park leaned back. And Kang himself? I'm going to have a different kind of conversation with him, Darrow said. One he doesn't know is happening until it's already done. He went to the apartment at 8 a.m. Taryn opened the door in a gray sweater, coffee in hand, and looked at his face for exactly 2 seconds. Come in, she said. No preamble. She had learned to read him faster than most people managed in years. Emberly was at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a library book propped against the fruit bowl. She looked up when he entered. It's not Tuesday, she said. I know. She studied him with those eyes that missed nothing. Is something wrong? I need to talk to your mom. Emberly looked at her mother, then back at him. Then she closed her library book, picked up her cereal bowl, and walked to her room without being asked, pulling the door almost shut behind her, leaving it open just enough to hear if she needed to. Darrow noticed. He didn't comment on it. He told Taryn everything. Not a managed version, the full truth. Kang, the meeting, the threat, what it meant, and what he intended to do about it. She listened without interrupting. Which he had come to understand was how she processed things that alarmed her complete stillness on the outside, while something worked very fast on the inside. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. How long? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Where? Outside the city. Secure. My men on the perimeter. Emberly's school? A tutor for the duration. Same curriculum. She won't fall behind. Taryn set her coffee down and looked at the window at the park outside, at the life she had spent 6 weeks carefully rebuilding piece by piece. I spent 4 years making sure nobody could use Emberly against me, she said quietly. No connections, no ties, nothing anyone could reach for. She looked back at him, and then she walked into a hotel lobby and found you. I know, he said. I'm not blaming her, she said quickly. I'm not even blaming you. A pause. I'm just saying that this is the consequence of one small girl deciding to trust someone. Yes, he said. Was she wrong? He held her gaze. No. Taryn nodded slowly. Then she walked to Emberly's door and pushed it fully open. Emberly was sitting on her bed with the library book, very convincingly pretending she hadn't been listening. Pack a bag? Taryn said. Enough for 3 weeks. Are we going somewhere? Yes. With him? Taryn glanced back at Darrow. He'll meet us there. Emberly considered this for approximately 1 second. Then she got up and went to her wardrobe with the quiet efficiency of someone who had packed and moved before too many times, under worse circumstances than this. Darrow watched her from the doorway. She trusts you completely, Taryn said quietly beside him. Don't make her regret it. I won't, he said. It was the most serious promise he had ever made. And he had made promises that ended empires. The house was in Yangpyeong, 2 hours, east of Seoul, where the Han River widened and the city thinned out into hills and farmland, and the kind of quiet that had nothing manufactured about it. The house itself sat back from the road behind a tree-lined 3 bedrooms, a wide kitchen, a garden that had gone slightly wild at the edges in a way that felt lived in rather than neglected. Darrow had owned it for 6 years. Nobody knew about it, not even most of his inner circle. It was the one place he had kept entirely separate from everything he was. No meetings held here, no names attached to it, no history inside its walls except his own. He had never brought anyone here before. They arrived at dusk, Taryn and Emberly in the car with Jin, Darrow following 30 minutes behind on a separate route. When he pulled up the driveway, the lights inside were already on, and through the kitchen window he could see that Jin had stopped for groceries on the way. He sat in the car for a moment before going in. There were other safe houses better positioned, more secure, easier to staff. He had chosen this one without fully examining why. He examined it now, briefly, then got out of the car. Emberly had already claimed the garden. He found her outside in the near dark, standing at the wild edge where the grass met the tree line, looking out at the hills with her hands in her pockets. She turned when she heard him. "There are fireflies," she said. He looked. There were faint pulses of light in the long grass, intermittent and quiet. "I've never seen them before," she said. "Only in books." He stood beside her and they watched in silence. The air smelled like river water and cold grass. Above them, the sky was doing something the soul sky never did, showing its full depth, stars appearing one by one as the last light left. "Is this your house?" Emberly asked. "Yes. It doesn't look like a king's house." Not critically, just observationally, the way she said most things. "What does a king's house look like?" She considered this seriously. "Bigger, with gates and stuff, and probably no weeds." "I like the weeds," he said. She looked at him sideways. "That's a bit weird." "Probably," he agreed. She almost smiled. Then she looked back at the fireflies. "Are we safe here?" she asked. Just like that, direct, no preamble. "Yes," he said. "From the bad man?" "You heard." "I left the door open on purpose," she said, without any apology. He nodded slowly. "Yes, from the bad man." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you going to fight him?" In a manner of speaking. "Will you win?" "Yes." She looked at him with those impossible eyes, measuring the answer the way she measured everything, not for comfort but for truth. Then she turned back to the fireflies. "Okay," she said. And that was that. Taryn was in the kitchen when he came inside. She had found the groceries and was moving through the unfamiliar space with the quiet competence she brought to everything. She didn't look up when he came in. "She okay?" Taryn asked, watching fireflies. "She's never seen them." A pause. "There's a lot she's never seen." He sat down at the kitchen table. The room was warm, smelling of garlic and something simple on the stove. The window above the sink showed the dark garden and the tree line beyond it. "Can I ask you something?" Taryn said. "Yes." She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "Chicago, the car. You were alone on that road at 2 a.m. No driver, no security. That's not how men like you travel." He said nothing. "I've thought about it," she said, "over the years. Who that man was. Why he was alone. Whether he was running toward something or away from it." Still, he said nothing. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "I'm not asking for details. I'm asking..." She stopped, chose her words carefully. "I'm asking if he's still running." The kitchen was quiet except for the stove. Darrow looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up at her. "He was," he said, "until about 6 weeks ago." Taryn held his gaze. Something in her expression shifted, not pity, nothing close to pity. Something more like recognition. The look of someone who understood what it meant to run because they had done it themselves. "The food will be ready in 20 minutes, she said, and turned back to the stove. It was the kindest response she could have given him. He sat at the table in the warm kitchen of the one place in the world that was entirely his own, listening to the sounds of someone cooking and a child outside in the dark naming fireflies one by one, and felt something he hadn't felt in so long. He had almost forgotten the word for it. He felt at home. 3 days passed without incident. Darrow had expected that. Kang was not a man who moved rashly. He was a man who made you wait, who understood that anticipation was its own kind of pressure. The silence wasn't absence. It was preparation. Darrow used the 3 days the same way. He worked from the house calls in the morning, documents in the afternoon, Jin driving out twice daily with updates, and returning to the city with instructions. The operation continued. The city didn't notice he was gone, which was exactly how he had built it. But something about working here was different. At 7 a.m., Emberly appeared at the kitchen table with her tutor's assignments and a specific pencil she refused to work without. And the sounds of her working the occasional question, the quiet concentration, the periodic progress updates delivered to nobody in particular, ran underneath his calls like a current he hadn't known he needed. At noon, Taryn made lunch without announcing it, and left a plate near his papers without interrupting him. a precise and considered kindness that he noticed every time. In the evenings, they sat in the main room, Emberly drawing, Taryn reading, Darrow with his files, and nobody felt the need to fill the silence. It was the most functional quiet he had ever occupied. On the third evening, Emberly looked up from her drawing and said to no one specifically, "I like it here." Nobody responded immediately. Then Taryn said, without looking up from her book, "Me too." Darrow said nothing, but he stopped pretending to read his file. Jin called at midnight on the fourth day. "He moved," Jin said. "Not toward you, toward the hotels." Darrow sat up. "Explain." "Kang filed a legal challenge this morning. Claims the acquisition was conducted under duress that Petrescu signed under coercion. He's petitioning to have the trust invalidated." Darrow was quiet for a moment. "He's going after the money." "Not just the money," Jin said. "If the trust is invalidated, the criminal case against Petrescu weakens. The wage theft charges become civil disputes. The workers lose their restitution. Everything you built that night unravels. He's not coming after me," Darrow said slowly. "He's dismantling what I did, piece by piece through channels I can't respond to with the tools I normally use." "Correct," Jin said. "He's being very clean about it." Darrow stood and walked to the window. The garden was dark, the tree line a black edge against a slightly lighter sky. Kang was smart. He had always been smart. A direct confrontation was expensive and unpredictable. But a legal challenge, quiet, procedural, conducted through proxies and suits, that was something else entirely. Designed to cost Darrow the one thing that couldn't be recovered by force. Not the hotels, not the acquisition, the 17 names, the trust, the restitution, Emberly's future. "Who is his lawyer?" Darrow asked. Jin told him. "And who is that lawyer afraid of?" A pause. Then something that might have been Jin almost smiling. "I'll find out by morning. Do that. And get me everything on the acquisition. Every signature, every timestamp, every witness. I want it clean enough to show a judge. You're going to fight this legally?" "I'm going to fight it every way available to me simultaneously," Darrow said. "That's different." He didn't go back to sleep. He sat at the kitchen table until 4 a.m., going through every acquisition document looking for weaknesses, finding none, building the case from the foundation up the way he built everything. At 4 a.m., Taryn appeared in the doorway in a dark sweater, hair loose. She looked at the papers, then at him. She didn't ask. She went to the counter, made 2 cups of coffee, set one beside his papers, and sat down across from him with the other. "Tell me," she said. "It's complicated." "I have an accounting degree," she said, "and apparently a lot of time." He almost smiled. Then he turned the first document toward her and started explaining. She listened completely, asking precise questions at precise moments that told him she was following every word and 3 steps ahead simultaneously. By 6 a.m., she had found 2 things in the documentation that he had missed. He looked at what she had found. "You should have been a lawyer," he said. "I should have been a lot of things," she said simply. "But this is where I am. No bitterness." Which made it land harder than bitterness would have. Outside the window, the sky was beginning to lighten. The garden emerged slowly from the dark, the wild edges, the long grass, the tree line where Emberly had watched the fireflies 3 nights ago. "I'm going to fix this," Darrow said. "I know," she said. "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what?" She was quiet for a moment. "What happens after?" she said. "When Kang is handled and the trust is secure, and Emberly is back in school." She held his gaze. "What happens to this?" The kitchen was very still. Darrow had no answer for that, which was itself an answer of a kind. The coffee was warm in his hands. The sky outside kept getting lighter. Neither of them looked away. Kang's lawyer was a man named Baek Sun-ho, 53 years old, double Harvard degrees, a reputation built on making problems disappear inside courtrooms instead of alleyways, the kind of man who spent his entire career telling himself he was different from the people who hired him. He wasn't different. He was just cleaner. Darrow met him in a coffee shop near the courthouse at 8 a.m. Public, ordinary, 2 men having a morning conversation that nobody around them would look at twice. Beck arrived 3 minutes late, a small power move that Darrow didn't acknowledge. He simply waited. Bake sat down with the careful neutrality of a man who had prepared thoroughly for this meeting and was confident in his preparation. That confidence lasted 4 minutes. Darrow placed a single folder on the table. He didn't open it. He just rested his hand on it and looked at Bake. "I know about Incheon," he said. The neutrality cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. 4 years ago. The land rezoning. The payments that passed through 3 shell companies before reaching your personal account. The family that lost their home because the rezoning was fraudulent, and you knew it when you filed. Beck said nothing. "I don't want to use this," Darrow said. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to give you the opportunity to make a different choice than the one Kang paid you to make." "And if I withdraw?" Beck asked quietly. "This folder goes back in my desk and stays there." Beck looked at the folder, then at Darrow, then at the folder again. "He'll come after me," Beck said. "Yes," Darrow said. "He will." An honest answer. Beck hadn't expected that. He sat with it for a moment. "Then what exactly am I choosing between?" he asked. "Kang's anger," Darrow said. "Or mine?" The coffee shop was warm and ordinary around them. Someone at the next table was laughing at something on their phone. Outside the window, Seoul was going about its morning completely indifferent to the conversation happening inside it. Beck picked up his coffee cup. Set it down without drinking. "The withdrawal will be filed by noon," he said. Kang called at 2 p.m. Darrow answered on the first ring. "You went around me," Kang said. No smoothness now. No unhurried pace. Just the flat, cold voice of a man whose carefully constructed move had just been taken off the board. "You went after a trust fund for 17 workers and a 7-year-old girl," Darrow said. "Did you expect me to do nothing? You've made an enemy today." "I had an enemy yesterday," Darrow said. "Today I just made it official." A long pause. "This isn't finished," Kang said. "No," Darrow agreed. "It isn't." He hung up. Kang's next move came at midnight. Not lawyers, not proxies. 4 men in a car outside the Yongpyong house, which meant Kang had found the location, which meant someone inside Darrow's circle had talked. Darrow had anticipated this possibility. He had left one door deliberately open, one piece of information shared in the wrong room to the wrong person, because the fastest way to find a leak was to give it something to carry. He knew who it was before the car finished parking. Jin's men were already outside when Kang's 4 arrived. It wasn't a fight, it was a reckoning, quiet and swift in the dark tree line, the kind that left no marks on the house and no sound that reached the bedrooms where Taryn and Emberly were sleeping. Darrow stood on the porch and watched. When it was done, Jin came to the porch and stood beside him. Darrow asked. "Handled," Jin said. "And Kang?" "He knows it failed. He knows we knew they were coming." Jin paused. "He'll understand the message." "Make sure he does," Darrow said. "I want a meeting. Tomorrow. Same place. And this time I won't be leaving until it's finished." The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Darrow arrived with everything. Not threats, not weapons, but paper. Financial records, property documents, evidence accumulated over 4 years of careful watching that connected Kang's operation to things that went considerably beyond territory disputes. Things that certain people in certain government offices would find very interesting. He placed it all on the table. "I don't want your territory," Darrow said. "I don't want your operation. I want one thing: complete and permanent distance from Taryn, from Emberly, and from anything connected to the trust." Kang looked at the documents for a long time. "And if I agree, then this paper stays exactly where it is, and we go back to the arrangement we had for 4 years. And if I don't, then I stop being someone who prefers arrangements." The room was very still. Kang was many things, but he had not survived this long by mistaking a man's patience for weakness. He had seen what Darrow had built in one night at the Blackwood Grand. He had seen what happened to Petrescu. He understood, sitting across from Darrow now, that the man opposite him had crossed a line that changed the calculation entirely. He had nothing Darrow wanted badly enough to stop him. "We have an arrangement," Kang said. Darrow stood, collected every document from the table, and put them back in his jacket. Good, he said. Don't make me come back. He walked out into the cold Seoul morning and stood on the pavement for a moment, breathing the cold air. He called Jin. It's done, he said. Bring them home. They came back to Seoul on a Tuesday. Darrow noticed that. He didn't mention it. The apartment on the 4th floor looked exactly as they had left it. The park outside the window, the kitchen counter Taryn had run her hand along on the first day, Emberly's drawings still pinned to the corkboard in her room, 3 weeks away, and it received them like nothing had changed. Because nothing had. That was the point. Emberly walked through every room, checking on things with the seriousness of a returning landlord. She straightened a drawing on the corkboard, checked the window latch, stood at the main room window and looked out at the park for a long moment. The tree lost some leaves, she said. It's autumn, Taryn said from the kitchen. I know. She pressed her hand against the glass. I just didn't want it to change while we were gone. Nobody said anything to that. There was nothing to say. Darrow stayed longer than 30 minutes that evening. Nobody remarked on it. Taryn cooked something slow and warm that filled the apartment with a smell that made the place feel like it had been lived in for years rather than weeks. Emberly finished her homework at the kitchen table and delivered her results to Darrow with the same quarterly report energy she always brought. Slightly more emphatic than usual after 3 weeks with a tutor she had found merely adequate. After dinner, Emberly fell asleep on the sofa with a book open on her chest, which was apparently a habit Taryn had long given up fighting. Taryn covered her with a blanket. Then she came and stood in the kitchen doorway where Darrow was looking out the window at the park below. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass. The apartment was quiet around them. The good kind of quiet. The kind that didn't need anything from you. It's finished? Taryn asked. Yes, he said. Kang? Won't come near you, either of you, ever. She nodded slowly. She had learned to take him at his word, which was not something she gave easily, or had given anyone in a long time. She came and stood beside him at the window. Below them the park was dark and still, the last of the autumn leaves catching the streetlight as they came down. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Taryn said quietly, not looking at him, You never answered my question. He didn't pretend not to know which one. What happens after? He said. Yes. He looked at the park below, at the dark tree Emberly had worried about from the window. At the city beyond it, the city he had spent 15 years navigating by force and calculation and the careful maintenance of a reputation built on fear. He reached into his breast pocket. He placed the candy wrapper on the windowsill between them. Taryn looked at it, then at him. Emberly asked me to promise I would come back, he said. I told her I would return it when I did. I've been returning it every visit and taking it with me when I leave. He paused. I don't want to take it with me anymore. Taryn was very still beside him. That's not an answer, she said softly. I know, he said. I'm not good at answers. I'm better at showing up. She looked at the candy wrapper for a long moment. Something moved across her face, not surprise, not quite. Something closer to the expression she'd had in the hospital when he had told her he'd been looking for her for 3 years. Recognition. The particular recognition of someone who had been careful for so long that being found felt both frightening and like relief. Tuesday and Friday, she said finally. Yes, and you stop leaving before we wake up. He almost smiled. You knew about that. Emberly told me, she said. She thinks you leave early because kings have important things to do in the morning. What do you think? She looked at him directly. I think you're not used to being somewhere you don't want to leave. The city hummed quietly below them. Inside the apartment, Emberly slept on the sofa with her book, breathing slowly, one hand hanging off the edge, exactly the way it had hung off the folding bed in the hospital on the first night. Darrow picked up the candy wrapper from the windowsill. He walked to the sofa and crouched down beside Emberly. He tucked the wrapper gently into the pages of her open book, the way you mark a page you intend to return to. He pulled her blanket up, straightened, turned around. Taryn was watching him from the kitchen doorway with an expression he had no word for, and didn't need one. Some things were precise enough without language. He didn't leave. 4. The first time since the night he had walked through the Blackwood Grand and felt a small hand on his sleeve. Shindairo, the steel dragon of Seoul, a man who had put 7 people in the ground without blinking, sat down in a warm apartment on a Tuesday evening and simply stayed. Outside the window, the tree in the park stood quiet in the autumn dark. It had lost some leaves, but it was still standing, and so was he.